This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 118. We are going from financials to financials. Last time it was October 2022 financials. This week it's November 2022. October was on a bit of a delay, so yeah, we're doing two of these in a row. For those who really enjoy these, you're welcome. All right, I am Craig, your host, and over there he is Chris. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing well. How about you?
You know, you sound like you're doing a little better.
My voice, it's still not 100%, but it is definitely better. Like I can actually talk.
Yeah,
so
I'll be the judge of that, Chris.
I didn't say I can talk well.
Oh.
I can talk.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling at least a little better. Today, again, we're talking about November financials. You left us last time with the tease that you thought things would be a little better. There were some crazy things that happened in the last couple of months that dragged the financials down, and you thought that November would look quite a bit better than October. We shall see if that is the case. But before we get there, I do want to remind everybody to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com to check out full show notes and links to everything that we talk about, including the documents, the profit and loss, etc., that we go over during these financials episodes. Also want to encourage you to head to, Chris, do you want to pitch? I'm always pitching. Do you want to pitch Motor Carrier HQ?
Yeah, head to motorcarrierhq.com and you can get in contact with a coach if you're interested. And it's always a free consultation. They can give you a little bit of an idea of what things would cost and what you maybe need to do depending on your circumstances. It's always kind of a custom tailored game plan because everybody's different.
Yeah. And this pitch brought to you by the U.S. Air Force. So thank you to them for flying over us right at this moment. All right, Chris. So as we move into the numbers, of course, we always want to prep with how are things out on the road, any interesting stories, any context that you want to give us for how the company's doing outside of just strictly the numbers.
Nate and I spent the day on the road yesterday.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Road trip buddies.
It wasn't in a truck. We we hit the road talking to shippers, which is something that we've talked a lot about, being important and needing to do. And there was a lot of good lessons, had some really good meetings as we're trying to develop more direct relationships with shippers so that we're, bypassing the brokerage and hopefully getting the best rates that we possibly can. And we learned a lot of good things. I think we've got a couple options that are going to bear some fruit and we'll get some good loads out of. And, one of the things that was interesting is talking to these guys is the shippers, as much as the carriers, everybody wants to eliminate the broker. And so anytime they can develop a relationship with a good carrier that can give, that can haul consistent freight, it's a good thing. And so one thing I would encourage people is don't be intimidated. No matter what size your fleet is, don't be intimidated to go talk to shippers. One of the shippers that we talked to talked about one of his favorite carriers that's a single owner operator. So just one truck. And he says every Friday, like clockwork, he shows up on time every time to haul a load of potatoes to LA, which is kind of one of their harder places to find carriers for. And he gets paid well for them. And it's a good relationship because they know it's somebody that they can count on. And that's, they all want to work with small. They like the small carriers because they get a little bit more personal attention. They're not dealing with a different person every 3 months when somebody quits or somebody moves on, like often happens in the bigger companies. And so they like that consistency.
Mm-hmm. So now, because Haulin Assets is based in the Salt Lake area, I assume that when you say you were out on the road talking to a lot of shippers, you're trying to find people around here, around Salt Lake, so that you have consistent relationships heading out, right? But I'm going to put myself in the shoes of that single truck owner-operator that you're talking about, taking the route to LA. Route or route, Chris?
However you want.
You know what? I'm just
potato.
Well, right.
We are talking potatoes.
There you go. So, but I'm thinking about that guy, and would it be is it feasible or advantageous for that guy to also try to pick up a consistent relationship in LA?
Yeah.
Or is it just going to be like, hey, you know what, load boards, whatever, on my way back into town? Or do you try to find somebody who can load you up on a Sunday?
That's the holy grail. So if you can find a consistent run like that where you're dealing directly with shippers on both ends, that's the best case scenario.
Right. Because then you're getting consistent work and you're and so are they.
Yep.
So, awesome.
So that's the best way to do it.
Cool. So yeah, anything else that you want to bring up from the last few days?
Yeah, again, kind of let's talk this shipper thing. When you're doing that, there's a couple things that shippers are really looking for. They want good communication. And so they're more likely to get that oftentimes from a smaller trucking company that really cares.
Right.
And so that's kind of one of the things that you need to show them is that good communication, the good, that you're going to stay on top of things, keep them in the loop of everything that's going on. Even if there's bad news, you're letting them know. That's something that's really, really important to shippers. And the other thing that you kind of have to think about, what becomes like a win-win situation in these is when you can be kind of consistent. So especially when we're talking rate, a shipper, they don't want to fluctuate with the high highs and the low lows of the market like a carrier doesn't really necessarily want to. And so oftentimes what happens in these situations, you have to look at the relationship as a long-term relationship. You can't say, oh, I can go get, the spot market's super hot right now, I'm going to leave my consistent relationship
right.
to go somewhere else to go chase the high dollars, because they're probably not going to pay those high rates when the spot market's super high. They're going to just try to avoid those too. But they're also not going to pay the low rates when the spot market's really low. And so you have to keep that in mind and go for that consistency and realize that, you may at certain times be able to go get a better rate somewhere else, but then you're kind of throwing your good relationship to the side. And then when rates get really low, they're not going to give you a decent amount
right.
to...
You're saying don't gamble.
Yeah.
If you can get that consistency, it's better to have that, even if for 2 months you might get a little bit better rate, or whatever the case may be. Because
in the long run, you're going to get consistency, and you're going to get a consistent rate that is a good, reasonable rate for both parties.
And if I can kind of piggyback on this, the reason that's going to be important for your owner operator as well as the shipper that you're working with is that consistency, predictability allows for planning in a way that you can't do otherwise. If you're just working on the spot market, you can't plan ahead as effectively. And so this is why, in macroeconomic terms, we might talk about how, it's good for an economy to have churn, a dynamic market and all this stuff. Okay, fine. But for your individual company, for each individual person listening to us and wanting to start their own thing or build their own thing, consistency is your friend. Predictability is your friend. Yep. Right. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a great way to put it. And the other thing that I kind of keep in mind is when you're trying to develop these new relationships, these shippers, they already have carriers that they've got relationships with, and you've got to be willing to be patient. You're not going to probably right away jump in and be their first choice. And so what you typically happens is one of two things happens. They've got a carrier that doesn't maybe quite have the capacity to haul all the loads that they've got maybe in one lane. And so, maybe once every other week that traditional carrier isn't able to haul the load, and then you want them calling you. And that kind of helps you get your foot in the door with them. The other thing that typically happens is a lot of these shippers, they're a sales group, right? And so, they may have this, all these relationships develop for products that they push to retailers. And then, they're always trying to find new retailers that they can sell their product to. And oftentimes when one of those opens up, they've got a new sale for a new retailer. Oftentimes their existing carriers aren't necessarily going to have the capacity to fill that lane. And so then that's when, like, if you're kind of you maintain consistent contact, even if you're not necessarily always getting their loads, but you fill in for one here and there, then all of a sudden one of these lanes opens up, and guess who's going to be the first person they call?
The person they know.
Yeah. So just be patient with them, stay in constant communication with them. even if you're not hauling regularly. Like oftentimes these guys say, yeah, reach out to me once or twice a week. Tell me when you're going to have a truck in my area. And if I've got a need, I will put you on it. And so you just you can't say after 1 or 2 weeks, hey, I've sent them my availability for the last 2 weeks and haven't got anything. That's probably going to be the case in most situations. Just keep sending it, keep sending it. Eventually you're going to get something.
Squeaky wheel that thing, man.
Yep. And they all say, hey, that doesn't bug me. Like, keep sending them and send me that information and we'll eventually get you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've got an impact tip for the end of the episode that has something to do with this. And so people should look forward to that. It's an actual actionable tip that people can do right now. But we'll get there in a moment. Chris, let's talk numbers. November 22 financials. Okay. Now, this was, you teased it, like I said, as a better month than last month. How did it actually go? Was it?
It was. I mean, the bar wasn't very high last month. I mean, it's not saying a whole lot, but yeah, it was a better month. I think December is going to be at least as good, maybe even a little bit better than November was. So yeah, we're at least moving in the right direction.
And do you feel like that's going, well, I guess I'm looking forward a few months after that, after the holiday rush and all that. Is it going to be rough again? Or do you feel like there's a trough that Haulin Assets was sitting in and now we're climbing out of it?
I think so. The whole market, I think, yes. You look at what's happened since really kind of March of this year. Rates and profitability and everything's kind of been on a downward trend. And the last 2 or 3 months, it's kind of feels like it's evened out a little bit. Especially between kind of like looking at the rates in October, November, and what I'm feeling so far in December. I think we've kind of hit that bottom. How long we guided along that bottom is, I don't really know. I would guess there's a pretty good chance that January and February are going to kind of be in a similar area, but I'm pretty optimistic that come March, maybe even into April, we're going to start slowly climbing out of that. And how steep that climb is coming out, who knows?
Yeah.
But I think we're going to be climbing out here before too much longer.
Well, here's hoping.
Yeah. Keep our fingers crossed.
Well, let's get some numbers. We always start with the total miles run, but I feel like I need to also contextualize this every month by asking how many trucks were out on the road. Were all 9 trucks running the whole month?
No, it was closer to 8.
Okay.
So better than what we had in October.
Sure.
That was part of the reason our numbers were pretty bad in October, but still not. We didn't have 9 trucks running at full capacity.
Yeah.
In October.
Okay, good to know. So how many miles did about 8 trucks run?
77,557.
77,557.
I think that's about 12,000 more than last month, if I remember right.
That would be, if it were 7 trucks on the road, we'd be averaging 11,000 per truck, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's 8 trucks. So yeah, it's a little lower maybe than we'd want it to be.
Yeah, a little bit, but not as bad as it could have been.
That's the thing is, for the next few months of these financials episodes, every time we come across a number where it's like, yeah, it's not quite where it could have been, we're always just going to be thinking, could be worse.
Yeah. if we with essentially, I mean, we basically had 8.5, 9 trucks going in November. I would have liked to have seen closer to 85, 90,000 miles.
Right.
Would have been ideal. But we're obviously a little bit short of that, but not as bad as it was in October.
Yeah. Welcome to a world in which the ideal remains the ideal and not the reality, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, Chris, deadhead miles. So what percentage are we looking at for deadhead?
This is kind of the big bright spot on all of our numbers. 3,162, which is only 4.1%, which is really, really low deadhead miles.
Yeah. All right. And that brought in a total revenue of, what was the number there?
$169,215.25. Definitely a lot better than last month, but still about $20,000 down from our high.
Right. Okay. So down from the high, but still looking better. Well, before we get to the final number, which is the actual, not the revenue, but the profit realized, hopefully, what's the other number? Oh, the rate per mile. What did we land on there?
The rate per mile was $2.18. Last month it was $2.12, which was our lowest. ever in a long time since pre-pandemic, I would say.
Right.
And so 218, again, a little bit higher, but that's part of what leads me to believe that we're near that bottom of the trough. Is it's basically leveled out the last 2 months. I think December is probably going to be, I mean, it's feeling to me like kind of in that same realm. And so whether we stay there January, February, and then start to climb out of it, I don't know. There's one other thing that may make it so that we don't, we stay at similar to that rate per mile, but if fuel prices would go down, we could be a lot more profitable at this rate per mile. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the numbers.
Okay, good. I was going to ask, but if we're going to talk more about it, I will swallow my words for now. All right. So, Chris, the profit number, does it have brackets around it? Or
no brackets.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah. So, an actual profit this month.
A little bit of a profit. Not nothing to get super excited about. $5,015.91.
Okay, but still, it's not a negative number. Now, Chris, let me see if I remember my lessons correctly. Per truck, we kind of want to see a profit buffer of about $1,000 per month.
I would say at least $1,000. I'd like to see more than that.
Yeah. What's your kind of magic number?
I'd like to see at least $3,000 of profit per truck.
Now, I'm not talking about, again, this isn't ideal, but I'm thinking more along the lines of, you've mentioned in the past, there are things that, like the interest payments on the truck, things that don't show up necessarily in the profit and the loss. So when we talk about a $5,000 profit, somebody listening for the first time might go, oh, holy smokes, $5,000, sweet. But that's getting eaten up by stuff that doesn't show up the same way in the profit and loss. So that's the number I'm looking for. If we've got 9 trucks out on the road, in my brain, I'm thinking, well, I want to see at least 9,000, and that's actually my break-even line.
I would actually say it's probably closer to 2.
Oh, okay. So it's much lower. 2 per truck.
Per truck, yes. Because especially when you've got brand new trucks like we do, the principal and the principal part of that payment, I mean, you're looking at a good solid $2,000 to almost $3,000. And so really to break even cash flow wise, we need to be a good solid, on average across our fleet, probably about $2,000 per truck.
Okay. So at 9 trucks, that'd be $18,000. So call it 20. We want to see profit of $20,000 as the break even mark. Yeah. And if we can get up closer to 25, 30.
I'd like to see at least, like with 9 trucks, $30,000. That's when I'm starting to feel like, okay, we're not only covering all those expenses, covering our cash flow really well. We're able to put a little bit more money aside, and even at some point, start to take a little bit of money out.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
take some profits.
Speaking of the Holy Grail, Chris, as a business owner, that's what you want.
That's what you want. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's it's not just about a 9 truck fleet. If you're running solo, you want to get to that point where, hey, I can actually start not just paying myself a salary, but actually withdrawing something. Yep. So, all right, cool. Well, that means that, what does that make it? 3 of the last 5 months were negative numbers. So a loss realized.
I think it was, let's see, I've got all the numbers right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. 3 of the last 5 months.
And so, hey, at least this month things are starting to look a little bit better. Good. So anything that you want to pull out from the profit and loss statement to highlight this month?
It was actually overall a fairly bland profit and loss statement. There are 2 things that I'd like to talk about. One is there's an expense that is way higher than we normally see. We had a hiring expense of $2,000. Usually that's been closer to like $100.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So we decided to kind of go out and be a little bit more aggressive in our advertising in finding drivers. And it actually proved to be super fruitful. And basically I'm oversimplifying this, but it's mostly Facebook advertising is where most of that $2,000 went. And it got us a good number of leads on drivers, was super helpful, and something we definitely are going to continue to do some more of. And I'm going to do a podcast episode that goes into a little bit more detail of exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Probably sometime in the next couple of months, share that with the listeners, a little bit more of what we've done and how it's helped us. And it's been good.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. And, as a side note on that, if anybody's listening who isn't, on their own authority yet, maybe you're still an employee driver, you're sending out resumes. I love hearing you talk about this because it's so important for people to remember. If you send out a resume or, you get recruited or whatever, and you end up not getting the job, don't automatically think that that's because that employer doesn't like you or doesn't think that you'd be good at the job. Somebody else might have fit the bill a little bit better this time, but I'm guessing you're going to hang on to some of these names that came across your desk
absolutely
for the future, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, that's all. Just don't despair.
Nate handles most of the hiring piece,
right?
Like the logistics, especially of it. We'll typically both try to, if we've got somebody that's like we're pretty sure we want to hire, kind of do a final interview with, and we try to do that face to face, as I've mentioned. Mm-hmm. Usually both of us will do it, or if I'm not available, my brother Chet will be in it. But we like to have at least two of us there talking with them. So we do that, and that's important. But Nate, anytime we get a handful of leads and we fill a seat, he maintains contact. Like he's probably got a list of 5 or 6 people right now that are potential future hires that, he'll
keep
talk to and just, see where they're at and how things are going. And, and if you do that, it's more likely that when the time's right for both of you, you've got to hire.
It'll work out.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So the other thing was fuel expenses from the P&L. You mentioned this earlier that fuel was crazy high. Yeah. How crazy high are we talking?
So $75,000 in fuel. Yeah.
What?
That's a lot of money.
Okay, wait. What was the revenue number was 177?
169.
169.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. I'm thinking maybe a past month. So 169, and you said 70. How much was it?
It was about 75,000.
75,000.
Let's see. I think I got the exact number. 75,706.
That's upwards of 40%. What?
Almost. It was like 44.7%. So I'm going to round up and call it 45%.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot. So if you remember, back in the first several years of Haulin Assets really it just started going crazy around March of this year, is when fuel just went nuts.
Yeah.
And before that, we were hovering around 25% of revenue.
Right.
And so that's actually a $33,000 swing. So that's where our profits are going right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So if we were at the same rate that we're at, the 218, but could reduce our fuel expense back to what it was normally in the past, I mean, we would have seen almost a $40,000 profit this month.
Yeah. Oh man.
And that would have been,
wouldn't that be something?
That would be nice.
So now it's December, Chris, which is listeners prepare for a shock, wintertime, which means that fuel prices generally come down. Right. Summer is always more expensive for fuel prices than winter, at least on the consumer side of things.
On the gas side, it is.
That's what I was just going to say. Is this the case for the diesel
Not
market?
with diesel.
No.
And I don't know, maybe we've talked about this in the past, maybe we haven't. I talk to people about this all the time because most people aren't aware of this. But if you look at a barrel of oil, it's not like you could say, okay, this 50-gallon barrel of oil, I can make 40 gallons of gas out of it, or I can make 40 gallons of diesel out of it. That's not how it works.
Right.
You get so much gas, so much diesel. And the diesel's also like that same derivative that they use to make the diesel out of.
Yep.
That's what makes
plastics.
It's what makes airline fuel. It's what makes home heating oil, which is really common back east. And that's why, so with diesel in the wintertime, it actually tends to go up because now you're competing with demand for home heating oil. In the Mountain West, we use natural gas.
Yeah.
But back east, it's more common to use home heating oil, which is a sister or brother of diesel.
Interesting.
And so it tends to go up. But with that being said, like we're actually starting to see some decrease in December on diesel prices. So I'm hoping that kind of keeps going in the right direction over the next several months. And it feels to me like that decrease in diesel this year is happening earlier than it normally does. And so hopefully it's an indication that the market's kind of equalizing a little bit. You've got all these pressures this year with the war between Russia and Ukraine and all the fuel mumbo jumbo that's going on over there with
the pipelines and the
pipelines
this being
in Russia,
sunk and that being blown up.
Yeah, and just Russia being one of the biggest exporters of fuel in the world. It's disrupted the whole market.
Well, I if this were a podcast about world issues, we dive into it, Chris, but it's not. Okay, so fuel prices were high. Hopefully they'll come down. I do want to ask you now, before we leave the financials numbers and get to the impact tip. First of all, I want to remind people that they can go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com and check out the actual profit and loss statement that we've been referring to. So you can see all the numbers there, and you can even comment there or on Facebook if you have any questions about it. If you'd like for us to dig into some of these other numbers that you see on there, you're welcome to throw those comments in there. But Chris, before we get to the impact tip, I think this is going to become one of my new favorite things, and that is having you pull out your crystal ball and tell me what next month is going to look like so that I can hold your feet to the fire and see if you were right. How's how's December looking?
I think December is going to look pretty good. The thing that makes it a little bit harder to predict is Christmas.
Sure.
If this was a normal month, I'd be really confident that December would be, based on where we're at right now, as far as the amount of revenue coming in and what we've been able to bill, I'd be super confident that December would be a pretty good month. But that last week of December, we're probably not going to have as many trucks on the road. Guys and gals taking some time off for Christmas. So
it's a big spanner in the works.
It is. Yeah. So, even with that being said, I think it's at least going to be as good as November. And if we can get some guys and gals back out on the road, like fairly soon after Christmas and delivered before January 1st, there's some potential that it could be one of our better months in the last 6.
Nice. Okay, well, I look forward to that coming exactly true. With predictability, no pressure. Volatility in the market, Chris, ever. We're so lucky that way in the trucking industry. All right, Chris, you've got an impact tip related to what we talked about at the beginning of the show. Will you share that with us?
Yeah, go and talk to 5 shippers within the next 2 weeks. And so when I say go and talk to 5 shippers, I mean a face-to-face, sit down, let's talk and see if we can, develop a partnership, get a good relationship, see if we're a good match for each other, essentially kind of dating, right? And when you're doing that, it's really, you're selling your company, right?
Sure.
You're selling your company's service. It's a sales job. And I've got a lot of experience in sales. And to me, a big chunk, 80% of sales is really just a numbers game. For every 10 phone calls you make, you're going to get maybe 3 appointments set. For every 3 appointments, like face-to-face appointments where you go talk to somebody, for every 3 of those you may get 1 that ends up bearing fruit. And so that's typically a very predictable model. It repeats itself.
Right.
10 calls results in 3 appointments, results in 1 sell. And that may not be the exact numbers, but it's something like that.
Well, and I was going to say, you're experienced in sales, and so those numbers might be a little higher for you, Chris, than some of us who don't do it day in and day out. Just something to keep in mind if you're, if you're running on your own authority and you're just getting started with this whole idea of direct relationships with shippers. It might take a little while to get your sea legs under you, get your presentation in order, and kind of get that sales thing figured out. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure.
But the only way to get better at it is to actually go out and do it. So go out and do it. Now, Chris, I do want to ask you, since this is, I love this. 5, what'd you say? 5 new shippers. 5 meetings?
Appointments. So face-to-face meetings, get 5 of them. So that means
within the next 2 weeks,
you need to call 20
right
to be able to set up the 5 appointments. But a certain number of, cold calls, calling guys somebody's going to have a need or going to want to develop some new carrier relationships because maybe their bench isn't as deep as they'd like it to be.
It's just like you with, you were talking about you and Nate keeping a list of drivers that you want to keep in contact with. Not that you have work for them today, but because you know that you probably will in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the exact same thing. My next question, again, with the idea of this being very practical advice, what does somebody need to bring with them? We don't need a whole college seminar, but what kind of numbers should they bring with them? Have your business card ready, obviously.
That's the one thing, the one physical thing you want to take with you is make sure you give them a business card.
Yeah. But anything else somebody who's never done this before needs to be prepared with that they might not have thought of?
Go with a good attitude. And I always, whenever I talk to these guys, was this kind of a situation or another one, I always like to ask them, what can I do to, become, whether it's your first choice or your second choice, what problem can I solve? What are you looking for in a good carrier? And then you just try to kind of sell yourself. Like, if you've been in business for quite a while, you talk about that. Talk about, typically a lot of the pain points with shippers are just lack of communication. Talk about how you've got good, strong communication, like how often you contact them, like when a product's on the road and something happens that you stay in contact. Every last one of these shippers knows that there's going to be breakdowns on the road, that their tires are going to go out, that things happen. Where they really get upset is when you don't make them aware of that in a timely manner.
Right. Own up to it, figure it out. It's the story you told about the DUI on the road. The way you were able to save that relationship with the shipper was by taking care of the freaking problem, because they know the problems happen. Yeah.
Over communicate.
Yeah. Interesting. And I would add on to that, keep your promises. And one simple way to do that is if you tell that shipper, hey, I'm going to follow up with you in a week, do it.
Do it. Yeah.
I'll send you an email once a week and just, see where you're at. And it doesn't have to be a long email. It doesn't have to be a novel or anything. Just let them know that you're still there, that you're in communication, that you're thinking about them, that you still want to run for them. And that'll keep you top of mind. And they know that you communicate and that you do what you say you're going to do.
Yep.
So I love it. Chris, anything else, any final thoughts for today before we call it?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, for everybody else, head to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. I can say that better. Here we go, Chris. HaulinAssetsLLC.com and MotorCarrierHQ.com. Those are the two places you're going to want to go to get all the resources that we've mentioned. You can avail yourself of those to get yourself out on the road, achieve your dreams of independence and vast, vast mountains of wealth. Wait, no, sorry, that wasn't in the script. Okay. Anyway, Chris, this is our last podcast for this year. So I will see you in 2023, and hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Same to you.
All right.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Greg.